Welcome to Social Media, Developing and Measuring Your Presence Online. What we'll cover in this session. So we'll look at a range of social media tools that you can use to maximize your use and impact of campaigning. So this is particularly looking at Twitter, Facebook and blogging. We'll do an overall introduction to the basics of these tools. So if you're already familiar with some of these, perhaps look at skipping some of those slides. However, we will look at a little more detailed views of how you use these tools to maximize your impact and also to monitor and measure their effectiveness. We'll also look at how do you know if you're successful, measuring your social media, and also, very importantly, linking it all up. How do you ensure your social media activity is strategic? How does it fit in with what everyone else is doing within your organization? How can you support and enhance the work of other campaigning activity? So, firstly, we'll start with Twitter, and particularly knowing the basics. So, if you're familiar with this, perhaps skip this little section, but I think it's probably a useful rerun of what Twitter is and how really it can support you in your activities. So, it's 140 characters a tweet, so you have to be quite clear and concise in what you're trying to convey. Also use hashtags. So this is easy for people to find your tweets when they're tracking that hashtag. You can also keep a track of conversations about your campaign, so you can retain an element of control and identify people who are interested in your charity. So what I'd suggest with hashtagging is following the organisations you're already aware of and then search on relevant hashtags to discover new and interesting users. So it could be things like generic terms, non-profit, fundraising, charity, tax treaties, inequality, something like that, or words which are more specific to your cause. So by searching for different terms every few weeks, you should be able to build a decent community of like-minded followers. And then looking at interaction. Twitter is a conversation, and I think that's very important to remember. It's a two-way process. It's not just broadcasting information. And I think people will feel a personal affinity with a particular cause, which is why they follow you and what your work that you do. So interacting with them is a great way of saying thanks for the support and cementing your relationship with them and with the charity. And in particular with doing that, make sure you keep your content varied and interesting and not repeated too often. Obviously you can repeat the things you say across the course of a day, and I would recommend doing that perhaps 2 or 3 times spaced across the day, but in slightly different messaging, slightly tailored to different audiences perhaps, or slightly different calls to action. But don't try and say the same things, exactly the same things too often, because that can put people off. Retweet people relevant to your work, build up interest that way, include links to interesting content, and embed links to your Twitter account on your website and support email. So you're trying to kind of link all that traffic from Twitter to website and back again, so you build up the reach and the engagement that way. So some terms on Twitter which you may or may not be familiar with. A Twitter handle. So this is quite a simple concept, but it's one that people often get confused about. So particularly if you put someone's Twitter handle, so the name that they use to tweet, at the very beginning of your tweet, Twitter assumes you're replying only to that person. So this is crucial. They omit that tweet from showing up on your Twitter followers' feeds. And if you don't want to send a message to just that person, then that's a bad thing to do. You want your followers to see what you're saying. So in that case, what you have to do is simply put a full stop before the follower Twitter handle, right at the beginning. For example, as the suggestion below. And that means all your followers will be able to see it and be able to follow your conversation with that Twitter person. Now, many things that people really are concerned about is how do you write a good tweet for maximum impact? People can write tweets, people think they can write tweets, it's just easy to create perhaps some words to fit into 140 characters, but how do you ensure you get maximum engageability, if that's even a word, with the tweet? And only 2 things really count with this, I think. It's maximum readability and maximum retweetability. And in order to do that, here's some following suggestions. Don't end every sentence with an exclamation mark. Humour is important, but overdoing it can put people off. And similarly, they'll also tune out, as I mentioned before, if you overtweet. Get to know the best time to tweet for maximum impact. You send your tweets at times when your followers aren't online. As a result, your tweets don't get clicked on, you don't get retweeted. So you do need to find out when a majority of your followers are online and schedule your tweets for those times. So we'll look at some tools later in which you can schedule your tweets so you don't have to be online and tweeting at that moment live. So you will be broadcasting and communicating with people who are going to likely retweet and pick up on your messaging and ensure you get those crucial retweets and comments. And as I mentioned before, it's really important to be responsive. Continue the conversation. If people comment, think about what you might want to say in response. Try and engage with people, and that's a good way to build up loyalty and increase your followers. Search for mentions of your organisation to see what others are saying. I think this is a really useful way of really finding out what your awareness about your organisation is on Twitter, rather than the people who are warm already to your cause, such as those who are followers already on your Twitter page. And here's some good examples of some tweets. So here you have 2 tweets, one of which includes a photo, and we know that people are much more likely to retweet or click on tweets which include photos or videos in the post, perhaps 2 or 3 times more likely. So if possible and if appropriate, I would suggest always including a photo in your tweet, and include a call to action. So here in the Oxfam tweet we have urge world leaders to act now and a link to a petition. There's some hashtags in there, so it will link up to threads of discussions on those topics, and some questions and getting people thinking about some of the topics mentioned and watching this. And it's very much important to have that kind of engagement and that questioning to get maximum engageability. So what's a pin tweet? Well, actually this is quite a useful and simple way to get people to see a tweet when it's at the top of your profile. It'll be the first tweet anyone visiting your profile will see. So it's a great way to show eye-catching images and linked actions and things you really want people to take notice of. So this is an example of a pinned tweet from Oxfam, which, as you can see, got a considerable number of retweets and likes, because it was pinned a number of times, and not just on the date, it was pinned at a later time too, when it was refugees were, as they always are at the moment, in the news, but particularly headlining some certain aspects to get that discussion and that dialogue going again on Twitter. And it's a very simple thing to do, very easy, as we will see. So here's some following easy steps on how to pin a tweet. As I mentioned, any tweet that you can send can be pinned. It's a free way of posting and highlighting a tweet that you want to get maximum engagement with. But important to think, why would you want to pin it and why do you want it to stand out? I wouldn't suggest pinning every tweet that you post. Think about which ones you really want to get engagement with. Perhaps it's something that has a very strong call to action, it's a petition, it's a video, it's something you really want people to engage with. And here's some suggestions of how you do that. So it's very easy, very simple, and I would recommend people having a go and doing that. Now, as we're all campaigners and activists, it's important to think about Twitter in how you use it for key campaign moments. And this is something which people perhaps know but don't always take into account, that timing is vital. It's really important to have a plan of activity, but also when the campaign is going, is really engaging at the right time with people to build momentum and interest. Create or adopt a relevant hashtag for a campaign activity to create some digital noise. So it could be an existing hashtag, tax justice together or inequality, or you could create your own which hasn't already existed before to try and build up conversation around that particular topic. When you're developing your campaign and throughout the campaign process, it's important to keep people updated about the progress. For example, using a countdown to action, 3 days to the launch of our petition, 2 days to we report on a particular activity, 5 days to get involved till we show our video. things like that can really get people engaged and sort of coming back to see more. Real life stories are crucial to engage most of your audience. People who may not be particular experts in the area, and though this can be difficult with particular tax related campaigning, trying to draw a human element to campaigning, wherever possible you can do this. It's really important because people love the human face of a campaign. If you can drill it down to see the human impact of a tax inequality issue, perhaps, then this is vital to engage people who may not be fully aware of the ins and outs of tax law. Make sure you're clear with your partners when you're going live with your campaign tweets. And when I say partners, this could be if you're working across lots of different organisations, or just simply colleagues, people within your organisation. Particularly big organisations where there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of tweeting going on. So make sure you have enough space in your Twitter and your social media activity plans, and have a defined plan with timings of the messages so everyone's clear, everyone's on board, you're not breaking any embargoes, or you're not going live with something that shouldn't be live as yet. So here again, it's important to link up with your media people, any media activity you're doing, any other activity that you're doing part of the campaign. Be consistent with your messaging. Again, this is really important. You're trying to engage a particular section, a particular audience, and it's important to try and keep that message consistent so they're not confused with what you're wanting them to do. And then, again, ensure there's a clear call to action for people. So what do you want them to do? What is the result of the campaign you want to achieve? Is it to sign a petition? Is it to get a number of people visiting or engaging with a video or a website or downloading a report? What is it you want people to do? This goes again to all campaign development and planning, but extremely vital when you can measure kind of activity and action on Twitter and social media, which we'll talk about later. So over to you. This is where I suggest you have a little break. If you're with colleagues, then discuss amongst them, or if you're on your own, no worries, just have a read through, have a little look at the kind of things that you do on Twitter, and this may be your personal Twitter activity, or it could be stuff you do actually at work or within the organisation. You may be involved in some of the Twitter activity that's going on. And have a think about what campaigns you've seen recently which you thought were particularly good. This could be a campaign that your organisation has done, another organisation similar to you has done, but it could be something completely different or completely unrelated to charity work or public campaigning. It could be a private sector campaign. Anything that you think would be useful to learn from, to get some lessons learned. Think about why you thought they were effective. Did they really convey the message clearly and succinctly? Did you really engage and feel energized and motivated by what they were trying to tell you? Did you feel connected? Think about how they did that, and are there any elements you could use for your own social media activity and campaigning? So this is a little checklist for tweeting, which you may want to print out and keep, or for example share it with other members of your organisation who perhaps don't tweet as regularly as you may, or just would like to know a little bit more about Twitter, and it's a handy, easy to know guide. So when you're tweeting, a few things to think about. What's the intended purpose of your tweets? Important, because I think people just think it's a knee-jerk reaction, let's just tweet about it, but they don't necessarily always think about the purpose of it. Does your tweet direct people to associate a source of information? What is the call to action? Does it inform or engage? What's the feeling, what's the emotion you're trying to convey in people reading your tweet? Is it anger? Is it support? Is it humour? Is it some sort of identifiable link with empathy? And is it the best time to be tweeting? As we talked before, some people, you can be tweeting and it could be sort of cold because the people who tend to be your followers are not up yet, or they're busy, or have a think about when the best time is to tweet, and then you'll get maximum engagement. Lastly, and it's a simple thing but people often overlook it, is do all the links work? Are there any spelling mistakes, grammatical errors? Obviously with 140 characters you have to be quite succinct and you have to perhaps edit some words, but if it doesn't make sense you're going to lose impact. So really be clear, have a check through, make sure everything's working, and then send it out. So Getting followers to take action. Now, this is something that many of us find difficult. You get enough followers, you have a lot of people following you on Twitter, but what's the next step? You're trying to get them from a low-level activity, which is simply retweeting or following, to actually doing something, is sort of taking action based on what you're wanting them to do. And with this, it's important to remember this can take time. It's not something that's going to happen immediately. It's something even larger organizations struggle with sometimes. But it's important to start from thinking about your supporter journey. And it's taking them from cold to warm. So cold meaning that they're not massively engaged at all. They don't know what you do or what kind of work you're involved with or how they can get involved, to being very warm, engaged, understand what you do and wanting to get involved. Think about what you want them to do. Is it signing petition? Well, if so, ensure they filled in their email contact details. For example, using change.org is a great tool to enable to do that. You can particularly target people whose data history sounds like they may be warm to you. Share material by email, so once you've got their details and they've signed a petition, fantastic. Send an email thanking them for doing it, build their knowledge and engagement, respond to any questions they may have. It's all about building that relationship to convert them from cold to warm. And from that, they may be encouraged to take part in other things, actual activities such as going on a march, taking part in a demonstration, coming to an event, and encourage their participation and perhaps hold their hand a bit if they're unsure. So if it's a march, say that other people are coming along as well, other people are engaged so they don't feel they're just on their own. Try and link them up with other supporters and other followers, and that's the best way you're going to get people to actually actively take part in something that you're wanting them to do. But as I said, it takes time, and don't feel frustrated if it doesn't happen straight away. It's something that takes many organizations a while to do, but there are some tools such as change.org which can really help you find and identify people who really might be the ones who can take that activity further. Now, building your influential audience. So not just people who are going to take part in things and go from low activity to high activity, but it's people who can help spread your message far and wide. Now, think about who are your power users and who can help you increase your reach. Here's a few tools which you can have a look at, which will help identify people that perhaps have a very strong following of people, where they're located, what do they tweet, what time. Fruji in particular is a free tool to help you work out where your followers and when your followers are online and the best time to tweet. So as you mentioned before, that can be a very useful way to engage with people. You can add filters to your results, such as location, following count, and number of tweets. So how you have to do this is you sign into the tool with your Twitter account, and then you follow people directly from the search results that you develop. So I would suggest you have a little look at that and identify people who you think might be really crucial to your support. And it's important to think that it's about developing relationships. Like with supporter journeys, developing relationships with power users, so influential people, celebrities, for example, online, on Twitter, takes time. It's not something that's going to happen immediately. If you tweet them a message and ask them to retweet something or reply, then chances are they probably won't if you're new and they don't know you. See first what you can do for them and not what they can do for you. So think about what they might get out of it, and the quid pro quo of Twitter, then chances are they're more likely to engage and do something that you ask them to do on Twitter. So now, moving on from Twitter, we're going to have a little look at Facebook. And I'm sure most of you are aware of Facebook. You may have personal Facebook accounts, but we're going to look at Facebook in terms of how to increase engagement and how to really engage people for maximum impact for your campaigns. So with Facebook, like with Twitter, it's really important to be topical, timely, and relevant with what you put out. As there's no limit to how many characters of the message you can post, it's really important to be succinct. People will ignore messages that go on and on and on. Trying to be clear in a couple of sentences, and always include a clear call to action, and if possible, some shareable content, videos, infographics, photos, human interest stories. People are much more likely to engage, much more likely to interact, and perhaps ask questions. Facebook in particular, the community of Facebook is much more likely to start commenting and responding. And it's great if you actually respond to these comments too. it's important to think about the comments you might not respond to or the comments you might ignore, but I would suggest that you don't delete comments unless they're completely inflammatory and just spam, because people will see then the dialogue that you have and sort of trust and engage with you in terms of your responses that you do. So keep it short, the shorter the better. Learn to edit your posts so they make sense in less words. And some good examples of some Facebook posts here. So they've all used a photo or a quote on a photo. There's petitions, there's calls to action, and they've kept, crucially, the message fairly short. So another way to increase the number of people engaging with your Facebook posts is by boosting posts. So these are posts which appear higher in their newsfeed, so there's a better chance your audience will see them. So this is a way through Facebook that you can really target people you want to engage with what you're doing. And you can be very specific. You can target groups by their interests, age, location, gender even, and really drill down into a select number of people you really want to engage with. You can boost most posts you create on your page, status updates, photos, videos, and the cost really varies on this. It really depends how many people you want to reach and what time of the day. And how to do this: simply go to a post you've created and then click Boost Post, which appears in the lower right hand corner of the post. You choose your audience and budget based on how many people you want to reach and how long you'd like to run your boost for. You can change your payment method that way too. To see the different kind of budget options, the best way to do that is to go to your post, click Boost Post, and in the box below, Total Budget, you can choose one of the budgets that appears, or you can click Choose Your Own to set a custom budget. And the cost of advertising on Facebook is completely up to you. So I would suggest having a little play around, a few little tests to see what works best. You can choose between a lifetime or a daily budget, as well as per 1,000 impressions bid or per click bid. You'll only pay for the clicks or impressions you receive, or up to the amount you set for your budget. And it should take about an hour or so for Facebook to approve the boosted post. And the boosted post can run between 1 to 7 days. So at the bottom of your boosted post, you can also see how many unique people have seen your post over the certain period. So that may all sound a bit confusing, pay-per-click and impressions, but the best thing to do is go into your Facebook account, have a play around, perhaps set a very low budget for one post that people you want to engage with, and see how it works. Compare that with a post that you don't boost and see the impact and the difference. So why should you measure your social media activity? Why is it important to think about how many followers you get, how many views you receive, how many people click on a petition? Well, I think it's important because it shows the value of your social media, particularly when you're reporting internally, when you're engaging with your colleagues and you're showing the impact of what you've done. It's often difficult with communications, which is all about raising awareness, engagement, to really give a tangible response and a tangible number of people who've engaged with what you've been doing. But with social media tools, you can really show that effectively. You're creating tweets, and yes, you're interacting with others on Twitter, but how do you really know if your tweets are doing well? It really gives you an indication of what's working well and what doesn't, so you can plan for the future and adapt accordingly. Tell you what the best times of the day are to post to get maximum people engaging with it, tailor what you do in future, and it's important to determine your goals. What do you want to achieve? You need to be able to measure how your tweets are doing so that you can make the necessary adjustments when your tweets aren't getting clicked on, and so that you keep on doing things better and keep on doing things which have been working for you. So we'll have a little look at how you can do that. So these are specific things you can measure on social media. Follower growth. This is quite a simple concept. Simply how many likes or followers you obtain on Twitter or Facebook. Now, reach is a little bit more detailed. It's the total number of estimated Twitter users that your tweets are delivered to. And impressions. Now, this is often the big number you'll see when people report about tweeting. It can be often in the millions, which can seem massively impressive. However, a word of caution, take that with a pinch of salt, because not everyone who receives a tweet will read it. It will just be something that they will have scrolled on their Twitter feed. So be cautious about using this measure. It's not a massively reliable indication of how well your tweet has done, though obviously it does look good when you're reporting. But just bear that in mind when you're looking at those numbers, because they can seem amazing, but in fact, when you drill down, they aren't as impressive as they may seem. So, a few things to think about when you're measuring your social activity. And it's crucial to go through this first before you start looking at tools, I think. So think about what you want to know. What do you want to find out? How many people are retweeting? How many people are following your call to action? How many views of your campaign webpage, which perhaps people have clicked through from Twitter or Facebook? How many people are responding to your emails? You just emailing, broadcasting, and not getting any responses. But be realistic. Particularly if you're starting from scratch or you haven't been doing Facebook or Twitter campaigning for very long, don't compare your campaign to an organisation which has been doing this for years and years, and who's got thousands more followers, thousands of pounds more budgets, and many more resources. You can't compare with their results perhaps yet, but think about other organisations which are similar to you, and that's a more effective measure of if you're doing well or if you're not doing so well, and what you can do to improve that. So a few tools to measure your social media activity. Google Analytics. Now with this, it's simply going in through Google and setting up a Google account. It's a free service and it can be very, very detailed. You can track website traffic, but in particular for social media, you can see traffic originating from your social media campaigns. And from what country, time of the day, which were the most popular tweets. It's a great way to link up your website activity and your social media activity, and as I said, very simple way to pull off reports and use it as a measure to report perhaps quarterly, every couple of months, on what you're doing. And TweetDeck and Hootsuite are tools which I use to simply write my tweets, and as well as measuring how well they're doing, particularly because you can schedule your tweets. So this means not having to write them and sending them out the moment they need to go out. You can say, I want this tweet to go out on Tuesday at 4 o'clock or Saturday at 3 p.m. and then it will do that. So you don't have to be at your Twitter account or at all hours of the day. And you can also monitor your interactions, set up columns for hashtags and messaging, and you can manage multiple accounts that way too. Hootsuite is a bit more comprehensive, as I've said. You can pull off weekly reports on activity and impressions. You do have to pay for this, but it doesn't cost very much, and it may be a simple way to find out how you're doing on social media without having to drill down into different aspects, which you might have to do on Google Analytics. So I would suggest have a little look at those tools, play around, see what works for you, how much level of interaction, how much level of sort of monitoring you need to do, and yeah, use what works best. So we're going to have a little look at blogging now. Blogging you may be aware of, you may have read lots of blogs, and I'd like to think amongst yourselves, what do you think about blogging? Do you read any blogs, and what are your favourites? These could be blogs related to the issues you work on, but they could be completely different. They could be about celebrities or politics or news. But why in particular do you think blogging is a good way to broadcast what you're doing? Now, we'll answer some of these questions a bit later, but it'd be interesting to know what you think and discuss amongst yourselves. What ways do you think its impact is different compared to other forms of social media? Why is blogging effective for campaigning, and what can it do for your cause? So similar with Twitter, use a few points about blogging which is important to consider each time you're thinking about writing a blog, or in particular for other people in your organisation who you may want to get involved in blogging. Now, blogs are not an article, they're not a press release. They're usually very short, fairly short, 400 to 600 words to try and keep the reader sustainably engaged. Now, keep it simple. What often happens with organisations is that policy people, or people with a lot of technical expertise and a lot of knowledge, are the ones who are asked to write a blog. Now, that's fantastic because they do have that knowledge. However, Think about the audience and who's going to be reading these blogs. It's not necessarily going to be people with a policy understanding or that technical background. So it's really important to try and make it understandable for people that have no knowledge of the subject. Chances are, if you as a campaigner are finding it a bit difficult to get your head around all the policy jargon, the audience that you're trying to target will have no idea. So try and avoid jargon and NGO speak wherever possible. Usually written in the first person. They're a chance for someone from an organisation to share their opinion, obviously opinion which is supported by the organisation, but it's not kind of organisational speak. And obviously vlogs are a great way to share dynamic content. So obviously these are video filmed and could be a couple of minutes, no more than that, instead of a written article, a written piece. And it's a great way to appeal directly to your audience. And what's effective with vlogs is when you don't just have, for example, your CEO or your senior staff speaking. You get people from all walks of life. You get volunteers, you get people from the field, for example, people who are working directly with your supporters. And that's a great way to share a range of content and to get a lot of different people engaged in your cause. And a few, building upon that, some do's and don'ts on blogging. So as I've said, make sure you write in a conversational tone, keep it simple, keep it engaging, no jargon, update it frequently. Now with blogs have a comment section, and this is where they differ from perhaps say a news article. You're asking questions, you're giving your opinion, you're wanting to get responses and engagement with the audience. So it's important to look at those comments and make sure they're responded to. That's the best way, again, like with Twitter, to get loyalty and to get engagement with people. Think about your branding and your image. Is the blog part of an overall campaign activity that you're doing? Obviously it's part of an organisation, and it should be consistent with everything else you're doing online. But don't steal others' content, or if you do, if you're using reports or photos, make sure you credit people. It's never a good thing to try and that sort of dishonesty on blogging, because people will just be turned off straight away, or they'll see it as unrealistic and not very credible. Don't forget your target audience, as I said. Make sure it's understandable for the people you're trying to reach, otherwise they'll just turn off or not engage. And here's an example of a blog which works particularly well from ActionAid. So it's an interesting title. It's kind of inciting interest. Ooh, who are these 5 women who show you anything's possible? There's a couple of sentences at the beginning which is introducing what the blog is all about. There's a call to action, and it's letting these 5 women speak in their own words, and the rest of the blog goes into videos and some first-hand accounts from voices from their own mouths rather than from this campaigner speaking, and that's really showing impact and effectiveness and credibility, I think, also from the blog. So summarising that then, a good blog will have a compelling title to draw the reader in, a few sentences to summarise what the blog is all about and what it will be addressing. So think of that as a kind of a short summary, a little bit of overview before you get into the real content of the blog. A picture related to the blog, so I would suggest a profile image of the person who's writing the blog, and also a photo or two which is related to the blog's content. An authentic voice. Now this is really important. So if it's your CEO blogging, for example, chances are it will probably be someone else writing it or ghostwriting for them on their behalf. But make sure this is the kind of thing that they would say, otherwise it would just lack credibility. Similarly, if it's someone who is one of your supporters or one of your beneficiaries, if the language is very detailed and, well, hopefully you won't be writing in this way, policy orientated, that will not seem credible either. So try and make sure that the words fit the person who's meant to be speaking them. And crucially, a call to action, linking up all the activities. So if it's a blog as part of a campaign, link it to find out more about the campaign activities, link it to a report perhaps, which is has issues and information about the campaign or the blog that's being talked about. More information on a website or a video, for example. Always make sure that's linked up, so you're directing people to find out more in other places. Now we're going to look at linking it all up and being strategic with social media. So I think with social media, it's often one person or two people who are assigned to do the social media, and they can kind of happily work away on what they're doing, but it's not always linked up with what the rest of the organisation are doing, and perhaps a more traditional type of campaigning activity, you know, marching, going out the streets, doing reporting, that kind of thing. So it's really important to link up together and talk to your colleagues and talk to people in your organisation who are going to be doing similar works. Then that's the best way to make sure it's most effective and you're reaching the right people. So perform regular content checks on what kind of content is liked by your audience, and so you can use those social media tools to do that, and at what time of the day works best, and then make regular adjustments. So with social media, it's important to be quick and responsive, and there can be things that happen in the news that you want to respond to immediately, and if you leave it a couple of days, then the issue's gone and the moment's passed. So be clear on who needs to see it before it can go live. What's your sign-off process? Is it simply your manager? Is it a small organisation you work for and it's just you? Well, that's great, because you don't have to worry about this so much, but just make sure you go through those Twitter checklists and those step-by-step guides to make sure it's really something you should be talking about, or really make sure it's going to be an effective tweet. But yeah, that's a crucial thing, I think, because when you're caught up in the moment and there's something you want to report on, if you don't have any sign-off processes, you can get sort of weighed down by who needs to see it, and then the moment's passed. So a good way of making sure people are aware of what you're doing on social media, and I mean this internally, but also across perhaps different organisations if you're working on a joint campaign, is develop a social media content calendar. So it's ensuring key moments are planned well in advance, so you don't have issues with hurried sign-off perhaps, and making sure people have the resources and the time to spend on those key moments and aren't pulled in lots of different directions to respond on things which perhaps aren't as important. So finally, thinking about everything that we've talked about so far, it's important to just keep your eye on what's going on in social media. As you know, things move very quickly, particularly with Twitter. There's hundreds of messages you get all the time, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by it. But think about, view what other people are doing, other organisations, other campaigns you can learn from. Use those hashtags to follow people and follow organisations and particular discussions which will be useful for what you're doing. Make sure it's strategic, and I think that's one of the most important things, to make sure you're effective and impactful with what you're doing. You're not having to hurry and respond, and you're proactive rather than reactive all the time. Remember that it's a two-way conversation. It's not just broadcasting. Engage with your followers. That's the best way to build up your supporter journey, which we've talked about, and loyalty, and increase your reach. Identify those who could help spread your message further and build those relationships with them. Remember, it does take time, so don't feel disheartened if it doesn't happen straight away. But if you look at all those things and you start to make those adjustments, then I would say that you're going to be much more effective campaigners on social media. Thank you.